So yes, thank you so much for the invitation to be here tonight. And I'm sorry Sarah couldn't be here. I wanted to meet her in person, but she extended the invitation and got me here. So thank you to her and thank you to all of you. And I wanted to first ask you, how many of you have been to the Gila? Wow, a lot of you. All right, all right. As you know, it's a really, really, really special place. I mean, the Gila is really what brought me to New Mexico. I fell in love with my husband on the banks of the Gila River, and also fell in love with the Gila River. And I got to New Mexico by way of my Environmental Protection Agency work, doing U.S.-Mexico border work out of the El Paso border office, but ultimately ended up working on the Gila River since Gila River protection efforts and other environmental issues based in southwestern New Mexico since 2003. And the Gila has been an amazing part of my career, and it's just been a privilege really to work with many of you who have also been part of the battle over many, many, many years to protect the Gila River. So before we dive in here, oops, sorry. Okay, here we go. I got to get used to this little clicker here. I want to situate you, give you some geographical context for the Gila River. Backwards, 649 miles stretch from the headwaters here in the Gila Wilderness across the Arizona border, where the Gila River meets the Colorado River outside of, well, basically in Yuma, Arizona, is the confluence. All right, okay. Click back on it on this one. Okay, there we go. All right, so let's zoom in here on the Gila River in New Mexico. So the Gila River, basically the headwaters are in the Gila Wilderness. So this is the Aldo Leopold Wilderness, the Gila Wilderness. Three forks, as many of you know, of the Gila headwaters: the West Fork, the Middle Fork, the East Fork. And then the river basically flows through this 45-mile canyon reach. So the river basically is bound by a canyon, and then spills out into the Cliff Gila Valley into a broad floodplain. Then goes back through a canyon called the Middle Box, and then down through the Red Rock Valley, so another floodplain, before it goes into the lower box, and then basically flows into Arizona. So I'm going to be showing you a lot of pictures from various points along the river. So, okay. Oh. Okay. So as many of you know, the Gila River is the last major undammed river in the state of New Mexico. And it doesn't have a large water development. We call it free flowing. I know our farmer friends don't like that we call the river free flowing because there are a number of agricultural diversions. But what we mean by free flowing is really the river doesn't have any impediments. It really can flow, do what it wants to do. It can meander, it can flood, can spread across the floodplain. It's not constrained like the Rio Grande, so it's not heavily managed. The agricultural diversions that we do have, they're earthen berms. They actually blow out at a certain flow, and basically the river can kind of do what it wants. So the natural flows are really what is key to the Gila River's biological diversity. It is that natural cycle of flows, the hydrograph, what is called the hydrograph, that really provides this mosaic of vegetation areas, of riparian vegetation across the floodplain that really leads to the rich biological diversity. Flows are also critical to fish. So we'll be talking in more detail about the importance of natural flows. So this is the lower end of the canyon reach of the Gila. So Turkey Creek is kind of right up there for folks who have been there before. So this is sort of the lower end of the canyon reach, and the river is going to basically spill out here in this next slide, into the broad floodplain of the Cliff Gila Valley. So this is drone footage, a drone picture kind of looking north to the mountains where that previous picture was shown. The river basically comes out, spreads across this broad floodplain. And you can see it's this very lush cottonwood bosque. The river's meandering, it's not channelized, it's sort of ribbons of vegetation, overflow channels. This is all super, super important to a healthy desert river. Okay, so tonight I want to talk about what makes the Gila River so important. We're going to talk about past threats and successes and ongoing threats, and then what do we need to do to ensure that the Gila River is around for the future, that we protect it? Because as we all know, climate change is the big, big factor here that's impacting all of our rivers in the West and especially in the Southwest. So as many of you know, the Gila bioregion is one of the most biologically and ecologically diverse areas in the country. I mean, really, it's we've got an overlap here. This is a picture of the Gila wilderness. There's actually, the river is way down. You can't even see it from this vantage point. But we've got the Rocky Mountains from the north, the Sierra Madre from the south, the Chihuahuan Desert, and the Sonoran Desert. So these four sort of physiographic sort of features really overlap and create this rich biological diversity. So the Gila wilderness is actually one of the largest expanses of ancient forest south of the boreal forest. So it's largest expanses of unlogged forest. So that's pretty significant. You can tell this is rugged country. So there's no way you're going to be logging in a lot of this area. The other thing to note is that the Gila River is the southernmost snowpack-fed river in the Rockies. So the snowpack, when it melts, that's what's really contributing to the base flow of the Gila River, keeping that river flowing year round. So that's really important. So I'm giving you all these these factoids about the Gila River, the Gila area and the Gila River, but it's true. I mean, this is, the Gila River has some of the most, it's the largest intact riparian gallery forests in the lower Colorado River Basin. I mean, so this habitat is disappearing across the West, and we've got some of the largest, or the largest intact forest left in the lower Colorado River Basin. So this is from Sunday. This is standing in the middle of a cottonwood gallery forest. So we're seeing Gooding's willow over here, cottonwoods, sycamores back here. It's lush, it's cool, it was super humid, and it was very buggy. So, all good things for those flycatchers and other birds. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So let's oops. What are some of the plants? Sarah told me I had to talk about plants. Since I'm talking to the Native Plant Society, I gotta throw some plant slides in here. But this is interesting stuff. What is this cottonwood willow gallery forest composed of? And Kelly Kincher from the Kansas Biological Survey, who I believe many of you might know because he's done a lot of work on the Gila. He and his colleagues, Bill Norris from WNMU and others, they did a survey back in 2006, 2007, a vegetative survey. This was when the Gila diversion was being talked about. And basically there was no data. And they got funding, I believe, from the National Academy of Sciences to go out and basically do a baseline vegetative cover survey. So we would have some data for any kind of modeling, be able to understand the system better and help to make management decisions. So, oops, sorry. We've got Fremont cottonwood, 20%. Really the highest composition or the highest species in terms of percent vegetative cover, followed by Gooding's willow, about 9%. Hopefully folks on Zoom can see this. So Baccharis, seep willow, close to 6%, coyote willow, 4%, Arizona sycamore, box elder, about close to 2%, Arizona walnut. We've also got velvet ash. We've also got some invasives, Siberian elm, and thankfully not much tamarisk. Thankfully, because we have natural flows and natural hydrograph that really isn't conducive necessarily to tamarisk. And so the native species can still outcompete the tamarisk. And we are doing, our colleagues at the Upper Gila Watershed Alliance, a GCC partner, they're doing a lot of tamarisk removal right now to make sure that we can stay on top of that problem and that they never get a foothold in the Gila. So, and I should say that their survey, and if I can send to you all the link if you're interested, but they identified over 300 species of plants in their 50 some odd plots from the Gila headwaters to the Arizona border. So it's a pretty interesting study. So what are some of the species that are dependent upon these cottonwood gallery forests? Well, these riparian obligate bird species are dependent upon these cottonwood gallery forests. So this one here is the common blackcock. Its name is not appropriate because it isn't common, but that's its name. About 220 to 250 breeding pairs in the US, with about 20 to 25 breeding pairs in the Gila region. Actually, there's a breeding pair in San Vicente Creek in the middle of downtown Silver City, if you can believe it. But anyway, they nest high in cottonwood trees, mostly cottonwood trees, secondarily sycamore trees. So they need this cottonwood gallery forest. Southwestern willow flycatcher, they're considered aerial foragers, insectivores. You know, they're basically catching and eating insects, and they nest in willow, cottonwoods. Actually, the Gila is a success story for the southwestern willow flycatcher. So we have the largest population of southwestern willow flycatcher anywhere. And so obviously the health of our riparian habitat is key to their long-term survival and to their current success. Their populations are actually, or their numbers are increasing. And this bird here is the yellow-billed cuckoo. The yellow-billed cuckoo is a federally threatened bird. It migrates between, goes to Latin America during the winter. This bird needs a lot of intact riparian forest, somewhere around 70 hectares, which is actually pretty big. The other thing we've learned about yellow-billed cuckoos is that they have high site fidelity. So the Nature Conservancy did some bird banding a number of years ago and found that the yellow-billed cuckoo, this pair, this nesting pair, they were banded. They came back for 2 successive breeding seasons to the same tree. That's from migrating between the Gila Valley to somewhere in Central or South America. I mean, that's like unbelievable. So obviously that we want to keep that cottonwood tree, right? I mean, if that cottonwood tree is not there when they come back, then you know, that's bad for their long-term survival. So fish, like I mentioned, we've got the largest, or the most intact, I should say, assemblage of native fish in the lower Colorado River Basin. These are 2 endangered fish. This is the spike dace and the loach minnow. And these 2 fish have evolved with the natural cycle of flows of the Gila. So they like riffles. They don't like standing pools. Unfortunately, we have catfish and smallmouth bass. So when you have diversions that pool up water, those pools are more conducive to catfish and smallmouth bass that like to prey upon these 2 fish. But fortunately, when the floods come through, the catfish and the smallmouth bass get washed away. But these native fish, they know how to deal with floods. They know how to hang out, and basically they survive the floods. That's how they evolved. So again, the natural cycle of flows, the natural hydrograph is what really is key to the long-term survival of these fish species too. We've also got 2 snakes and the Chiricahua leopard frog. So this is the narrow-headed garter snake, the northern Mexican garter snake, and the Chiricahua leopard frog. Both of these snakes they feed on fish. They need riparian habitat to survive. Interesting about the northern Mexican garter snake, it was thought that it was extirpated from the Cliff Gila Valley. And then the Nature Conservancy, and I'll show you in a little bit some pictures of the Iron Bridge tract that they bought 10 plus years ago. Cows were removed from that area, and the riparian vegetation recovered, and the Albuquerque Biopark was down back in 2013. And they found 3 northern Mexican garter snakes. So a species that was thought to be extirpated from this area of the Gila River was found in this recovering riparian area. So that's another success story. The Chiricahua leopard frog really is suffering from habitat loss, as well as, you know, fungal disease. I mean, that's happening to a lot of amphibians, although there is a very healthy population of Chiricahua leopard frog over on the Mimbres River, on the Nature Conservancy's Mimbres River Preserve. So that's exciting stuff. Okay, I just wanted to kind of give you a sense of these flows that we've been talking about, because really, like I said, it's these natural cycle of flows. Let's look at all, I mean, we don't need to focus on all the details here, but what the purpose, my purpose for putting this slide in, and this is from the Nature Conservancy's Gila River Flows Assessment Study, but just so you could see the variability in some of these flows. It's a very, very variable river. And that is very, very important. So, and why is it important? I mean, we obviously sediment transport, rivers carry sediment. We need, the river needs sediment basically to wash downstream, washes nutrients, spread across the floodplain. Those nutrients are what help the riparian forests grow and to be healthy. The flows, the springtime flows, they actually, this snowmelt runoff, these flows during the springtime, they cue spawning for native fish. The other thing that the flows do is they recharge groundwater. So that's another really important thing. So as these flows come down the river, as long as the river is not impeded, it can spread water across the floodplain, soak into the ground, and basically keep that groundwater close to the surface. So why is that important? Cottonwoods and willows, if the groundwater level drops below 10 feet, cottonwoods and willows start to die off. And so it's really important that we don't impede our rivers. We let them do what they need to do, recharge groundwater. And then the other thing is beavers. I mean, I know beavers cause a lot of problems for people, but beavers, again, they evolved in this system along the Gila. There were thousands of beavers at one time. Many of you probably know the name James Ohio Pattee, who came through the Southwest. He was a big trapper, trapped out a lot of the beaver. Not just him, but a lot of, this was a big trapping area. Beavers were big, right? And beavers disappeared, but they're key really to recharging groundwater. So let's see. Oh, the other thing, just one more thing I wanted to mention is these flows are also important to cottonwood recruitment. So some of the flows come through, they prepare the soil, the substrate for cottonwoods to seed, and then provide basically that soil moisture so that those cottonwoods can grow. So again, really, really important to have these natural cycle of flows for recruitment of new trees. I mean, we're not seeing, for instance, on the Rio Grande or a very incised systems where rivers have cut down and they're not connected to the floodplain. We don't see cottonwood recruitment or willow recruitment because of, because of the disconnection between the river and the floodplain. And that's another issue we'll talk about here in a minute. Okay. All right, so you can I just wanted to point out here, this is actually Mogollon Box day use area over here. So Mogollon Creek is sort of coming in. This is the head of the Cliff Gila Valley, just as the river's kind of coming out of the canyon reach. But I think this picture sort of shows, you get that sense of these overflow channels and sort of these ribbons of vegetation. So here's the main channel, but yet look how we have this healthy vegetation across the floodplain. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about threats. This is some drone footage of one of the agricultural diversions, the Upper Gila diversion, and this is a push-up diversion. So what happens is basically a bulldozer comes in here and kind of pushes up the bed of the river and kind of makes this berm, cutting off the main river channel here and pushing all of the water into the diversion. This is the irrigation ditch. This is the Upper Gila irrigation ditch. This is about 25 cubic feet per second of flow in here. You can see that this water's all pooled up back here, prime habitat for our smallmouth bass and our catfish. And you can see the dewatering that's going on downstream of the diversion. So, you know, these diversions, obviously, there's a lot of agriculture in the Cliff Gila Valley, and for since the 1870s, early 1870s, I think was when the first water right goes back to in the Cliff Gila Valley. I mean, agriculture has existed here in some semblance of a balance in the valley. And so, I know that the irrigators are frustrated with these diversions because every time there's a high flow, the earthen berm basically washes out. And there's a period of time where this diversion structure and the water going into the ditch is a little less, it's less efficient. However, in contrast to like a concrete permanent diversion, this is a better deal for the Gila than it's porous, right? So we are getting some seepage, we are getting some groundwater infiltration into groundwater, but at a certain flow level, this is going to blow out, and the main channel of the river is basically the water's going to flow down the main channel of the river. So, in the low flow period, so May and June, actually we had an early monsoon this year, but you know, into July, sometimes even August, if the monsoon is late, we can have pretty significant river drying, 1 to 2 miles. So obviously fish aren't going to survive. They're going to be pushed back into smaller pools. They need water to survive. Groundwater starts to drop. Cottonwoods and willows die off, and we see that. We see that right now. So that is a problem. So let me just, let's see, I think I have one more. Yeah, so you can see here, again, the river basically ends here and then it's completely dry. I think this is maybe like a third, half a mile kind of down from that upper Gila diversion. So cattle, grazing cattle are also a problem. More drone footage, you can see, this is just downstream of the Nature Conservancy's Iron Bridge track. So you can see cows grazing here on the floodplain. Cows are really destructive, right? I mean, they like to eat all this nice, yummy, these little saplings, this vegetation that stabilizes stream banks. So when cows chew everything down, that makes the stream banks more susceptible to erosion. That means in higher floods, you have nothing holding onto the bank, so rivers can cut down, and then all of a sudden, the river is disconnected from the floodplain, and that water can't spread out across the floodplain, and the water just goes shooting down the river because basically it's become like an incised channel. So, and then cows are really bad for recruitment, right? Cottonwood recruitment. So I'm going to show you some pretty dramatic pictures here. So this is the Nature Conservancy's Gila River, Iron Bridge tract. So this is about 10 or more years ago after they first bought it, after cows were removed. And this is what it looked like. 10 years later, this is what it's looking like. So look at that vegetation. Look at those cottonwoods that have come up and more willows here. Now this is the lower box of the Gila River, so down from Red Rock. So there was a movement, and this was well before my time, but conservationists and maybe the State Native Plant Society was involved, but But basically there was a movement to get the Bureau of Land Management to remove cows from the area of critical environmental concern in the lower box. And that's what happened. And you can see in these pictures, these are from November of 1995. This is from Fisherman's Point. For those of you who've been to Fisherman's Point, this is looking downstream, and Verdon is just downstream of here. Red Rock is upstream. But my husband and I were there in October. Look at those cottonwoods. So this is, you know, close to 20, 25, almost 30 years of growth. It's a beautiful, rich, lush gallery forest. This is looking upstream. And here's what it looked like in 1995. Look at the cobble here, not much vegetation on the stream banks. This is what it's looking like now. So this right here, this sort of rock outcropping is this one here. So this, I guess this picture is just a little bit farther away, but you know, amazing, amazing growth. So this was what we call passive restoration. What was the only thing that was done was removing cattle from the floodplain, and the river was able to recover itself. Pretty impressive. So we've also got some non-native plant species. We've got tamarisk, and I told you we actually, which is really wonderful, we don't really have that much tamarisk, not like, you know, the Rio Grande where, you know, millions and millions of dollars are being spent to remove tamarisk. We don't have that problem. We are, right now, cost-effective management is to remove the tamarisk that we are finding so it doesn't get out of control. We've got elm, we've got the Kelly Kincher study from 2014. They found this white sweet clover is actually 2.3% of the vegetative cover in the Gila River riparian area. Bermuda grass down here, unfortunately. This is Russian thistle. That was about 3% of the vegetative cover, unfortunately, that nasty stuff. And this is Mexican fireweed. That is about 1.4% of the vegetative cover. So we've got these nasty invasives in the floodplain, unfortunately, that cause problems. So as I said previously, the Gila has been historically the southernmost snowpack-fed river in the Rocky Mountains. And unfortunately, Dr. Dave Gutzler recently retired from the University of New Mexico. Some of the climate modeling that he's been doing in the last number of years reveals that the Gila is likely to cease to be a snowpack-fed river by mid-century. Unfortunately, I think, you know, it's probably sooner than that. I know that since I've been in Silver City 26 years, when I first arrived, our local Gila Hike and Bike was renting cross-country skis to go skiing up in the Gila wilderness. Well, they haven't been renting cross-country skis, unfortunately, for many, many years because we are just not getting the snowpack that we used to get. As I mentioned, that snowpack is critical to the Gila's base flow. So Dr. Gutzler was part of the Interstate Stream Commission's 50-year water plan, which is going to be coming out in August. And for those of you who maybe some of you actually watched or participated in some of the public participation, the Zoom, and they did a number of public meetings, but they're predicting anywhere between 15 and 30% reduction in stream flow for the state's rivers in the next 50 years. So that's pretty significant. Obviously, that has huge implications for municipal water supply here in Albuquerque on the Rio Grande, but you know, on the Gila, from an ecological standpoint, from an agricultural standpoint as well. And so, you know, this might, even in the absence of diversions, agricultural diversions, this river drying could potentially be exacerbated. The lowest flow that we've seen on record at the Gila gauge was 7 cubic feet per second. That's really, really, really low. So I can't imagine that getting any lower. Okay, so what do we need to do to protect the Gila River for the long term? I mean, we've talked a lot about flows tonight. We have to continue to protect the Gila's flows. I mean, that's really the key to the health and resilience of the Gila River. And the people, and I know many of you probably know this story, the folks have been trying to dam the Gila since 1910. That was the earliest record that we could find in the Forest Service's records for the first proposal to dam the Gila. There have been lots of proposals over the years. This is the Hooker Dam Association from the 1930s. The Hooker Dam was basically on the books, pushed for decades. It was part of the Colorado River Basin Projects Act that was passed in 1968. That's the big act that set up the Central Arizona Project. Well, the Hooker Dam was set up as a part of the Central Arizona Project. So for years, the Sierra Club at the time, and you know, very active in fighting the Hooker Dam. Ultimately, the Hooker Dam went the way of ended up on the President Carter's hit list. So President Carter really, at the I guess towards the end of his administration, there were a lot of pork barrel projects, and the Hooker Dam was considered a pork barrel project, and so it officially ended in his administration. But that didn't stop people. We had the Connor Dam next. So the Hooker Dam, actually, the site of it was going to be up at the Gila gauge, just below the wilderness boundary. It would have flooded the wilderness. So that was another issue that also Clinton P. Anderson, who was our senator at the time, he helped you know, set up the Gila wilderness in subsequent years after the Wilderness Act was passed in 1964. So he didn't really like the Hooker Dam. Well, they got rid of the Hooker Dam. Then we had the Connor Dam, or this is an ad that the Gila Conservation put together, and Southwest New Mexico Audubon at the time was very involved as well. So it was called the Connor Sham. And basically, this dam would have flooded prime irrigation land, so the farmers didn't like it. Plus, all the endangered species, the endangered fish, and other endangered species. So that didn't work. We also had the mongoose diversion. That was defeated by the Gila Conservation Coalition. Basically, the town of Silver City, after spending $6 million on studies, the town of Silver City said, we don't want to pay for the mongoose diversion. So that was like a diversion and off-stream storage facility. But then back in 2003, the state of New Mexico started negotiating with the state of Arizona over the Arizona Water Settlements Act, which was passed in 2004. And essentially, it's been a 16-year battle basically to defeat diversion proposals under the Arizona Water Settlements Act. And so the ultimate defeat came in 2020 when the Bureau of Reclamation issued its draft environmental impact statement. And it, again, just like with the mongoose diversion in the early 90s, it came down to economics. basically it was too expensive and the water would have been unaffordable to farmers. So in the end, nobody wanted to pay for the water, and the state under Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham was unwilling to subsidize the water because it would have taken more money from the state basically for that project to go through. So that essentially the NEPA process, the environmental impact statement process, ended in the summer of 2020. In 2021, one thing I didn't mention, there's $91 million in the New Mexico Unit Fund. This was money that came from the federal government to the state of New Mexico, basically to fund water projects under the Arizona Water Settlements Act. So that's a lot of money, and that would have gone to the diversion. Well, now that there isn't going to be a diversion, there's this money sitting in the New Mexico Treasury. The legislature in 2021 banned the use of that money on a diversion, which was great that they did that. And now this was called House Bill 200. Maybe some of you weighed in on that. That was kind of a weird legislative session. We were on Zoom. But basically that passed, the legislation says the Water Trust Board and the Interstate Stream Commission, they need to come up with an application process for applicants basically to apply for some of this $91 million. Now, the diversion proposals are not going to go away. And so what we're doing and what we'll continue to do is organize people to protect the Gila's flows and, protect, make sure that money goes to good water projects that really will help to ensure sort of the long-term sustainability of our water supply in southwestern New Mexico, but at the same time won't impair the Gila's flows. So what else can we be doing? I'm sure many of you have heard about the MH Dutch Salmon Greater Gila Wild and Scenic River Act. Dutch Salmon was the Gila Conservation Coalition founder and chairman until his death in 2019. He was a big outdoorsman, Wildlife Federation board member. I mean, maybe some of you know Dutch, but he was just a wonderful advocate for the Gila River. So Martin Heinrich and Senator Tom Udall introduced that bill a couple years ago. It would protect 450 miles of the Gila and San Francisco rivers and its tributaries. And right now, the legislation was reintroduced earlier this year. There was a hearing in early June, and I believe the next step is markup in Senate Energy and Natural Resources. So we're hoping that that's going to move forward. And if you want more information, want to take action, you can go to wildgilariver.org. But protection obviously is important if we want to protect our riparian areas, and that's what this piece of legislation is going to do. Okay, forest planning. I know this sounds boring. Maybe some of you have been involved in the forest plans up here, but the Gila hasn't had a forest plan in over 30 years. So they've been, the Gila National Forest has been doing the forest planning, but obviously how you manage the forest influences what happens in your watersheds and all of your streams, in your rivers. And the key for this latest iteration of the forest plan for the Gila National Forest is climate change. And we hope that when it comes out later this year, that we'll have a roadmap for how the Gila National Forest is going to manage forest land, but then also we as the public can use that as a tool to hold the forest accountable. Travel management, that's another big issue. So the travel management plan for the Gila was already issued, but it's had lax enforcement. We've got people running ATVs and vehicles up and down the San Francisco River, the Gila River in places. These are closed roads or a place where a road didn't exist and people are creating new roads. So the Upper Gila Watershed Alliance is starting a volunteer road monitoring program. Obviously, vehicles in creeks and our rivers destroy that habitat, cause erosion, destabilize stream banks. So it's sort of bad, and so it's something we need to be paying attention to. Feral trespass cows. Maybe some of you have followed this issue, but back in the 90s, I believe, cows, there was an action, the Forest Service removed cows from areas, allotments that they shouldn't have been in, but unfortunately their roundup was not very effective, they think, and that we've had decades of breeding of cows that are feral, they're wild, right? Well, the population had gotten pretty high in the Gila wilderness, so they were causing a lot of destruction to the riparian vegetation. And like we saw in previous slides, this is really bad news for these riparian areas. So the Center for Biological Diversity took action. They settled with the Forest Service. And so there have been two actions where they have been able to remove some of these feral cows. There's still some remaining. I think there's going to be more work on that. River restoration, just a couple more slides here. River restoration. And, we need to be doing more of this. We've already talked about the non-native invasive species removal, like tamarisk, cattle exclusion. So a lot of work to get cattle out of riparian areas. And then stream restoration work, especially post-fire. I mean, we've had the Whitewater Baldy fire back in 2012, and there's restoration work is just starting now, 10 years later, in some of the Willow Creek area that was burned. Now we've got the Black Fire, so there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And then finally, I just want to put in a plug for President Biden's 30 by 30 initiative to save nature. 30 by 30 refers to saving 30% of our land and water by the year 2030. This comes out of E.O. Wilson's Half Earth idea. Maybe some of you have read his book, Half Earth, where his studies, his assessment was that we need to save 50%, half the Earth's land and water by 2050. This is an interim goal, 30% of land and water by 2030. So there was an executive order last year. The Biden administration followed up with America the Beautiful initiative. There's money coming down at the local level through the infrastructure bill, basically for outdoor recreation, but other types of restoration and infrastructure work that could help with these 30 by 30 goals. And our governor, Lujan Grisham, passed an executive order last year. So, and she's committed to getting more funding, conservation funding for projects. So what are we talking about? We're talking about like conservation easements. We're talking about land acquisition. There's also the Land and Water Conservation Fund, federal funding that can be matched with state funding. There's a lot that can be done, and right now is a good time. There's a lot of money coming down. Also, for this river stewardship funding from the state, there's $10 million. I don't know if you all are kind of plugged into that, but the deadline's coming up July 26 for restoration funding. So the state is really hoping that they get a lot of applications, proposals. And then for those of you who would like to come down to the Gila, we have the 18th annual Gila River Festival coming up September 22nd through the 25th. The Gila Native Plant Society is actually going to be leading a wildflower field trip. Last year they did 2 sort of tours of their Silver Creek Botanical Garden, talking about native plants of the Gila. But anyway, it's a great way to go on guided hikes where we have birding, rock art, and we also have online and in-person presentations, kind of the same setup that you all have here. So GilaRiverFestival.org for more information, and the registration opens August 1st. And with that, I'd like to say thank you so much. Thank you so much to all of you for being here and learning more about the Gila. And really thank you to the State Native Plant Society, the Albuquerque Native Plant Society, because over the years, I know, we've reached out to your organizations, and, we really wouldn't be where we are today on the Gila diversion without all of the amazing cooperation and partnerships that, everybody just really stepped up and really took a stand for the Gila. So thank you so much to all of you for doing your part and playing a role in protecting the Gila. So thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions? I think I've got a few minutes, right? It's 8. Yeah. Lee.
In California, a lot of other states, the idea is always in national forests to build reservoirs. Has there never been a project or idea on the upper reaches in the national forest to have a reservoir?
Well, yeah, that's essentially what like the Hooker Dam would have done, the Connor Dam would have done. They would have built.
You know how far it goes up?
Yeah, they would have been reservoirs. They could have been used for boating or fishing or whatever. But
so even out the flows, can't they?
Yeah, potentially. But again, it's really hard. I mean, okay, so science, we know a lot, but we don't know everything, right? So, replicating the natural hydrograph with releases from a reservoir, it's just really hard to do that. And so,
I'm not advocating.
Yeah, right. No, I know, but yes, that the Interstate Stream Commission made that very argument, right? Is that we could make, I think they were like, well, we could guarantee a base flow. So, but
all that recreation funding.
Yeah, potentially, right. But again, it is problematic. Also the money, the money was a huge factor. The ISC's initial costs for their big diversion and off-stream storage was like $1 billion. So, there was just no way. And I don't think that people of the state of New Mexico would subsidize that. And because we certainly couldn't afford that kind of money in southwestern New Mexico. Any other questions? No? Okay, well, thank you. Yep.
So the settlement agreement funds aren't available for the diversion anymore. What kind of projects are being considered, and is any of that available for restoration?
Good point. Yeah. So $91 million. Oh, yes. So the question is, for folks on Zoom who didn't hear, is $91 million. What sorts of projects is that money available for? And can you fund restoration projects? And so there's one, the Arizona Water Settlements Act says that The money must be spent on projects that meet a water supply demand. So municipal conservation would basically qualify. But this was something that came up early on. Would something like watershed restoration qualify if you're able to conserve water, so to speak, or recharge groundwater and basically have a better base flow. The Interstate Stream Commission never really bought into that idea. And so it's unclear this go around if they're going to be okay with that. We're not really sure. So we haven't seen any kind of application procedure yet, but or actual application and sort of what the criteria are going to be for projects. But yeah, I know a lot of people are hoping that restoration, I mean, obviously if you're restoring the watershed and creating a healthier watershed, you're doing good things for your water supply. But I think from the ISC's perspective, it's really hard to quantify that and really, and some of the studies have been kind of mixed on that. So anyway, so we'll see.
Thank you.
We'll see. Yeah. Any other questions? No? Okay. Well, thank you so much again. And yeah, if you want to follow things, gilaconservation.org. So thank you, everyone.